Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning. I'm Lisa Mateo.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
Karen, we begin with a high-stakes meeting at the White House later today. European and NATO leaders will join President Volodymyr Zelenskiy in Washington for talks with President Trump on ending Russia's war in Ukraine. President Trump is expected to outline terms for a potential peace deal discussed with Vladimir Putin, with Washington likely to focus on territorial concessions demanded by Russia. Here's what Volodymyr Zelenskiy said ahead of today's meeting.
It's important that America agrees to work with Europe to provide security guarantees for Ukraine, and we are very thankful to the United States and to the President for such signal, and therefore for everyone in Europe. This is a significant change, but there are no details how it will work.
Ukraine's President Zelenskiy. Now, the meeting follows a weekend call among allies, during which President Trump is said to have told European leaders he's open to U.S. involvement in providing security guarantees for Ukraine.
Meanwhile, Lisa, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. is holding out hope for a ceasefire in Ukraine, and he spoke on NBC's Meet the Press.
It was agreed to by all that the best way to end this conflict is through a full peace deal. There's no doubt about that. I mean, who would be against the fact if tomorrow we came to you and said we have a full peace deal and it's done? I think that's the best way to end the war. Now, whether there needs to be a ceasefire on the way there, well, we've advocated for that. Unfortunately, the Russians, as of now, have not agreed to that.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio made the comments on NBC's Meet the Press. Catch the program Sunday afternoons on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, unlike Zelenskyy's last meeting at the White House, Karen, the Ukrainian leader will be accompanied by European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, UK's Keir Starmer, and Germany's Friedrich Merz. We get more in the meeting from Bloomberg News senior writer Stephanie Baker.
I've noticed that Trump seems to echo the position of the last person he's spoken to, which is why he was talking tough, having spoken to European leaders going into this summit with Putin. I think that the European leaders will want to get that back on track. It is a high-powered delegation. I think they want to make sure that there's no repeat of the Zelenskiy disastrous February meeting in the Oval Office. And I think they will be stressing that there can be no land swaps, no concessions on handing over Ukrainian territory to Russia for no concessions, and that they want to clarify the details of whatever these, U.S. security guarantees might be, because it's all quite vague at this point.
Bloomberg News senior writer Stephanie Baker says President Trump also told allies he wanted to reach a deal quickly and would urge Ukraine to come to one, with the goal of holding a Putin-Zelensky meeting within a week.
Lisa, President Trump's trade advisor Peter Navarro is slamming India for buying Russian oil. In the Financial Times, Navarro wrote that India's purchases of Russian oil are, quote, opportunistic and deeply corrosive of a global effort to isolate the Kremlin. He added American consumers buy Indian goods, and he said India uses those dollars to buy discounted Russian crude.
Well, more than 3 months after the U.S. and U.K. agreed the first meeting of a string of deals to reduce tariffs, many trading partners are still waiting for the rhetoric to become reality. Britain, Japan, South Korea, and the EU all say the White House promised them exemptions in trade talks, but hasn't signed them into law. Bloomberg's James Woolcock has more from London.
For the Brits, it's steel. Take a listen to Prime Minister Keir Starmer 3 months ago.
Just a few moments ago, I spoke to President Trump, the President of the United States, and I'm really pleased to announce that we've agreed the basis of a historic economic prosperity deal. It will remove tariffs on British steel and aluminium, reducing them to zero.
The UK Prime Minister was very clear, and no one in the US corrected him, but the steel exemption has never been finalised. So the current tariff on UK steel exported to America is 25%. For Japan, South Korea and the European Union, it's the exact same problem, but with cars. Fears are growing. The scale of the US's global trade talks are making delays inevitable and likely causing more economic damage. In London, James Woolcock, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, James, thank you. Well, we turn to the Middle East now, and hundreds of thousands of Israelis took to the streets to protest Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to expand operations in the Gaza Strip. Organizers said as many as 500,000 people attended the main rally in Tel Aviv. Netanyahu, however, insists that calls to end the conflict will only embolden Hamas.
Those who are calling for an end to the war today without defeating Hamas are not only hardening Hamas's stance and delaying the release of our hostages, they are also ensuring that the horrors of October the 7th will recur again and again.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaking through an interpreter. Netanyahu's government this month gave the army the green light to take control of the de facto capital, Gaza City, and crush Hamas holdouts.
Well, turning to the markets, futures right now, well, little change. This is ahead of those talks in Washington. Another possible market-moving event comes on Thursday, and that's when the Kansas City Fed's annual economic policy symposium kicks off in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And as Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini reports, we could see even more news emanate from this year's gathering than usual.
Watch for headlines when Fed Chair Jay Powell addresses the gathering Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern. He could give a hint on how likely the Fed is or isn't to cut interest rates at its September meeting, and also by how much. The theme for this year's gathering is labor markets in transition, demographics, productivity, and macroeconomic policy. Also, Powell is expected to unveil the Fed's new policy framework, the strategy it will use to achieve its inflation and employment goals. And then, of course, we could also get headlines from President Trump about his choice to replace Powell, whose term as chair officially ends next May. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
Denise, thank you. And a programming note, we will have live coverage from Jackson Hole this week. It all starts on Wednesday and finishes up with a special edition of Bloomberg Surveillance. Tom Keene, Lisa Abramowitz, and Michael McKee will all be part of that special starting at 9 a.m. Eastern on Friday. Plus, watch for special episodes of the Odd Lots podcast. Joe Weisenthal and Tracy Alloway will be taping several conversations from the event as well.
And in other news, Karen, Air Canada has suspended plans to restart operations after the union representing 10,000 flight attendants decided to defy a return-to-work order. The Canada Industrial Relations Board offered staff back by Sunday afternoon, but the union refused, calling the order unconstitutional. Air Canada now plans to resume flights Monday evening. The shutdown, which began early Saturday, affects about 130,000 people daily.
It's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Hurricane Erin has re-intensified after moving past Puerto Rico, with the storm expected to increase in size and remain over the Atlantic as it churns off the U.S. East Coast later this week. Bloomberg meteorologist Craig Allen has more.
The larger size means a larger wind field and thus a larger ocean effect. So even though the center will be several hundred miles off the mid-Atlantic coastline, the North Carolina Outer Banks may take a severe beating before the turn from the storm, and the swells could reach 30 to 50 feet just offshore of the Outer Banks. In fact, Erin will produce life-threatening surf and rip currents all along the beachfront from Florida clear on up to Maine.
Bloomberg meteorologist Craig Allen. Erin is expected to remain a hurricane through at least Wednesday. The NYPD continues to search for multiple shooters after at least 3 people were killed and at least 10 wounded inside a nightclub in Brooklyn early Sunday. New York Mayor Eric Adams condemned the violence.
Gun violence of this magnitude, it really scars a community and a city.
The mass shooting happened at the Taste of the City Lounge in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, following a dispute that appears to be gang-related. Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch called it a terrible shooting that comes in a year of otherwise record-low gun violence. The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, currently investigating the death of Jeffrey Epstein, will today hear closed-door testimony from former Attorney General William Barr. The House Oversight Committee is seeking records related to Epstein's ex-associate Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein died in 2019 in federal detention after being charged with sex trafficking. Barr conducted a personal interview of the incident and confirmed his death was a suicide. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. Time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Here's John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Mets and Mariners split 2 games at Citi Field, finished the series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Site of the Little League World Series, the Mets scored 3 runs in the second inning, got 4 more in the fifth, with Mark Vientos blasting a 3-run homer. They beat Seattle 7-3, so back-to-back wins since losing 14 out of 16. They stay ahead of Cincinnati for the last wild card. The Reds won 3-2 in 10 innings. They ended Milwaukee's 14-game winning streak. The Yankees in St. Louis tied 4-4 in the 9th inning.
Bases are loaded for Cody Bellinger.
Hits that hard to the right side, and it skips past the Jay-Z into right field. 2 runs are going to score. Judge into third. The Yankees lead it. It's 6-4 in the 9th.
On the Yes Network, Yanks added 2 more. They won 8-4 for their first series sweep since early July. Red Sox lost to Miami 5-3. Nationals lost to the Phillies 11-9. The Giants' top receiver Malik Neighbors has not practiced in 2 weeks, yet to play in the preseason. It was believed to be due to a toe injury suffered last spring. Now it's been learned it's back tightness. The Giants do expect Neighbors to play the season opener. BMW Golf outside of Baltimore, where Robert McIntyre had that brilliant opening round, kept the lead until 3 days after his 62. He shot 73, playing with Scottie Scheffler, who caught McIntyre, then passed him, and then Scheffler clinched the tournament on the 17th hole.
Lifts this out of the rough, onto the putting surface, now bringing it down the slope towards the hole, slowly moving, now picking up speed. That's getting close to the hole, now picking up speed, getting close, Scottie Scheffler, and that is right near it! He made it! Chip and birdie, oh my goodness, do you believe it?
PGA Tour Radio, the greatest golfer in the world with one of his greatest shots, chipping in from 81 feet. Tennis in Cincinnati, the men's and women's finals are tonight. The men have Jannik Sinner against Carlos Alcaraz. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Karen, Lisa.
John, thank you. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak coming up after this.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on Sirius XM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
Well, today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskiy and his European allies, they arrive in Washington to begin talks with President Donald Trump. And this is after the U.S.-Russia summit on the Ukraine war ended without a ceasefire. So what can we expect today? Well, let's turn to someone who knows. That's Bloomberg senior editor Bill Farries. Bill, thanks for joining us this morning. Can you break down, first of all, who's expected to attend the talks and what should be discussed or what will be discussed?
Well, it's a huge cross-section of the European leadership that has been most closely aligned with the fight in Ukraine and with President Zelenskiy. So you've got German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, French President Emmanuel Macron, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, Italy's Prime Minister, the Finnish President, and of course the EU President Ursula von der Leyen. And then the head of NATO is also expected. It's going to be a big turnout. They want to quickly follow up on the discussions that took place in Alaska last week. It's very rare to get all these leaders just to suddenly adjust their schedules and fly in. But I think there is this realization that this could be a really important moment in what happens going forward with Ukraine, Russia, and the United States.
Now, do we know any details about what was discussed at Friday's U.S.-Russia summit?
We don't have a lot of information, particularly given how much time Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spent together, including that time in the limousine. But, you know, the almost maybe three hours or so they spent together. The one thing that has come out consistently is that the U.S. officials have said there were discussions about Washington joining European nations and providing some kind of security guarantees for Ukraine if there's a peace deal. So Ukraine wouldn't necessarily be getting that kind of Article 5 treatment that full NATO members get, but a group of countries operating outside of NATO would kind of guarantee Ukrainian security going forward if there's a deal. That still leaves a lot of details, but it is a big deal. It's seen as a big deal that the U.S. would be agreeing to that so far.
Now, one of the big sticking points, Bill, is over a peace deal is territorial issues. So after this past Friday, does it look like Ukraine may have to give up some large areas of land, or do we know any details about anything else that was said as far as territorial issues?
Well, the U.S. talk has been that there will be some sort of land swapping, and they do say that the Russians offered some concessions. But so far, from Ukraine's point of view, Russia's concessions are, involve land that it has taken from Ukraine. So, of course, there's Crimea that it took in 2014, but Russia has demanded basically the entirety of the Donbas region, and that's a region that it's Ukrainian territory, but that's a region Russian troops don't even control the entirety of. So Moscow still appears to be demanding that they be able to control a region that their troops have been fighting for since 2014 and haven't been able to take in battle. So that's probably a non-starter with Ukraine. But there is some talk about, whether Crimea would be part of that final deal. From its point of view, Ukrainian officials don't see any land surrendering any land at this point. And that's going to be kind of at the heart of discussions going forward.
Yeah, most definitely. And I got to ask, the last time President Trump met with Zelensky, it didn't go so well. It turned into like this shouting match. I mean, are we expecting a little bit more of a civil meeting this time around?
Anything could happen. It's interesting. You have so many European leaders coming in. When you look at the White House schedule, though, they are not listed as being in the Oval Office meeting between Trump and Zelensky. So if they're there for backup or support, that's going to have to come later. That meeting with Zelensky and all the EU leaders is scheduled for after the meeting with Donald Trump in the Oval Office.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak, your morning podcast on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed by 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 92.9 in Boston, and nationwide on Sirius XM Channel 121.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, now with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto interfaces.
And don't forget to subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. It's the latest news whenever you want it, in 5 minutes or less. Search Bloomberg News Now on your favorite podcast platform to stay informed all day long. I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Lisa Mateo. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.